Hi everyone, hope you're all well. This is Andy Romero-Birkbeck from We Are Wellbeing. If you've not seen any of the work that we've done before, so we are a wellbeing company, and we've delivered quite a few things through the CIPD before. I've been asked today to put this wellbeing webinar together for you. Especially in these times that we're going through at the moment, self-care is fundamental to our survival for both our physical and our psychological and our social well-being. Initially this was supposed to be delivered for individuals in person. Obviously we're all working from home at the moment, or a lot of us are, so this is about how to look after yourself through working in isolation and in particular working at home when you've got all the other stuff that home life brings with it. So throughout the session, we're going to be looking at some different elements of self-care. So we're going to be defining self-care. We're then going to be taking a look at self-awareness and how self-awareness can give us some element of support when it comes to looking after our physical and our social, our psychological well-being. We're going to be taking a little bit more of an in-depth look at self-care and then some of the tips for staying well and a bit of a summary. So it should take us about half an hour to get through all of this. Obviously, this is a recording as well, so if anybody's got any questions, I'm not going to be live to answer your questions, but I'll put my details on the last slide so you can get in touch with us if you do have any questions. So, first of all then, the definition of self-care by the World Health Organization. So they define self-care as the ability of individuals, families and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. Now, just to put it out there, when I first started writing this seminar, my intention was to really focus on psychological well-being, so mental health and looking after our state of mind whilst being off or working from home. Whereas this definition is very much about the physical health element as well. And I think that's right. The World Health Organization definitions tend to be really broad because it is the World Health Organization, and how it's defined for us in the UK is going to be totally different from how it's defined somewhere else in the world. So they do tend to be quite broad. But it is about the physical and the psychological elements both together. Then I took a look at the charity Mind. So they talk about the benefits of self-care as opposed to a definition. So they say that self-care techniques and general lifestyle changes can help manage the symptoms of many mental health problems. They may also help prevent some problems from developing or getting worse. So this really is fundamental to how we look after our psychological state of mind. We should all be practicing some elements of self-care. You probably do a lot of it already without even knowing that you do. A lot of it is just how we look after ourselves on a day-to-day basis. But hopefully you'll be able to take some nuggets of information and some tips on how to use best practice to look after your different elements of your well-being. As far as We Are Wellbeing goes, what's our outlook on self-care? So for us, it's really looking after your personal, physical, mental, social and financial well-being. So all four pillars of well-being. It's about being able to manage the manageable. And we put that in and we talk a lot about manageable health because it's not about getting worried and fretting over the things that we don't have control over. So we talk a lot about managing our manageable health. And the thing about your manageable health is if you don't look after it, it quite quickly becomes unmanageable. So we could be talking about things like blood pressure. Blood pressure, on the whole, largely is very manageable. But when people don't look after it, it can become unmanageable. And this is where people then need to take medication and take other extreme measures of keeping things in check. So it's about controlling the things you've got some element of control over, taking some responsibility over your own well-being. When we talk about responsibility of well-being, quite often when we talk to organisations from an organisational setting, we talk about three different elements of responsibility. What's the responsibility of the organisation? What are the responsibilities of, say, line managers, for example? But also, what's your responsibility on individual employees? And from an employee point of view, are we responsible for our manageable health? Absolutely. So this should apply to absolutely everybody within your organisations. So as far as self-awareness goes, one of the questions I always ask on whether it's stress awareness or whether it's mental health awareness training courses, one of the first questions we'll always ask is, are you honest to yourself about your own emotional state? So really what we want to define here is, when you're going through a tough time, do you recognise it? Now, one of the troubles is if somebody's going through a tough time and they don't recognise it for what it is, a bad day, quite easily bad day can turn into 2 bad days or 3 bad days or quite quickly into a bad week or a bad month. And it can be a real downward spiral. So asking a simple question like, are you honest to yourself about your own emotional state? A lot of us might not be, but it's something that we should endeavour to do. And there's different ways we can become more honest to ourselves and have that recognition. So the first way would be to complete some kind of journal. I don't know about you, I'm not a prolific writer. I don't sit around on a daily basis writing down all my thoughts. But what I will do is just have a traffic light system. So I have red days, if it's a bad day, if it's a amber, it's somewhere in the middle, and green days are my good days. And what I'll do is I'll just put a little stamp in my diary or in my Outlook calendar just to give myself some sort of track of the kind of day that I've had. And what you start to notice are the trends and the kind of things that you identify and become aware of what maybe caused the bad days. So I don't know about you, but for me personally, I have a really, really bad day, a crap day, probably once every 6 weeks. I don't know whether you would call that man time of the month, but I know that day comes around. And because I know that day comes around, I know to expect it and I know what to do when it comes. And it doesn't always make it that day better because I know it comes. It's still sometimes it's quite a difficult day and I tend to be low mood on that day. But I also know that because it comes around, I also know that it goes as well. And I know that the following day, 99% of the time, is usually pretty good. So it's having that awareness. But what you can also do is look at the triggers. What are the kind of things that trigger your bad days when they do come around? And it tends to be good practice to keep some sort of journal of your mood. The next thing that we can do is making daily personal and professional goals. So having some sort of purpose in life. So we talk about having resilience. One of the most important components to having resilience is having purpose and having meaning. So identifying what can I do on a personal level. So for me, that might be going to do some exercise. And then on a professional goal, it might be getting through this many emails, doing this many webinars, or some sort of professional goal that I need to achieve that day. But getting it written down on paper and then reviewing it at the end of the day. Then we've got building personal resilience. So obviously we could do a whole seminar, a whole webinar, a whole one-day training course on personal resilience. So resilience is our ability to bounce back, to handle difficult times and then to get through them. So never more than right now do we need personal resilience. Whether you're working from home, whether it's a struggle, some people are thriving, absolutely loving working from home. Some people, it's an absolute nightmare. So for me today, I'm recording this webinar while my wife and the kids have gone on for a dog walk because there was no chance I would ever get this done while there's kids in the house. So I've tried to record these before, you get halfway through, the kids run in, absolute nightmare, you have to bin it and start again. So having some sort of plan is essential. Building personal resilience, how can we overcome that? One of the ways we can identify personal resilience is to complete some sort of resilience diagnostic. So some sort of psychometric. One that I would recommend is the I Resilience report by Robertson Cooper. So if you Google I as in like Apple I Resilience, you can Google that. It'll come up with the Robertson Cooper website. You should be able to find it no problem. If you're struggling, ping us an email. I'll send you the link. But they offer it for free, and what they do is they use the information from your results anonymously for national statistics, but then you obviously get the results for free, so it's a pretty good trade-off. Finally, it's listening to some guided relaxation and identifying how good are you at focusing on something tangible. What you notice, or what you will notice if you don't currently practice mindfulness or some sort of guided relaxation technique, is that your mind will wander all over the place. Now, what you will notice then is when you practice it and you get better and better, your mind will wander far less. So when I do guided relaxation, or some sort of mindfulness technique, my mind wanders still, but far less than it used to do. And that's when you know you're getting better at it. So for me personally, if I'm having a stressful moment, and I'm losing my focus, I'm losing my concentration, I'll take a break, I'll go sit on the sofa, I'll lay down for a couple of minutes and do something called 4-5-6. So I will inhale for 4 seconds, I will hold my breath for 5 seconds, and I will exhale for 6 seconds, and then I'll repeat it. Now while I'm holding my breath, I will think about how does my heart rate feel. I don't count it. I'm just aware of how it feels. So while I'm doing that, I'm thinking about the 4, 5, the 6. I'm doing the counting. I'm doing the breathing. I'm thinking about my heart rate. What I'm not thinking about is the thing that got me stressed in the first place. And quite quickly, you'll feel your heart rate drop, your blood pressure, your adrenaline levels, your cortisol levels. All those things start to lower. So it's a good balancing technique. So if you don't currently have a mindfulness technique, what I encourage you to do is Google mindfulness, find some mindfulness techniques and give them a go. They don't all work. What works for you might not work for me and vice versa, but it's worth giving them a shot. The next part of self-awareness then is recognizing what are the signs and symptoms of when we are struggling. So we've got stress, we've got anxiety, and we've got depression. So here, I've only really focused on what we call the neurotic elements of mental ill health. So stress or chronic stress, anxiety, an extreme form of worry, and depression, an extreme form of sadness. All classified as extreme forms of normal emotions. So you've all been stressed, you've all been worried, you've all been sad. Now when we look at all these different signs and symptoms, there's absolutely loads there. And so within those, there's a bit of a mix of emotional signs, behavioural signs, and physical signs. But what you notice is there's quite a lot of crossover. So this isn't about you recognising whether it's stress, anxiety or depression. This is you recognising some sort of change. Now if you notice that change occurs and that change is lasting and it's going on for more than a few days and into potentially a couple of weeks, then it's worth going and speaking to somebody about it. So whether that's speaking to your manager, whether it's speaking to an EAP, an employee assistance program if you've got one, whether it's speaking to a doctor, whether it's speaking to your partner, that's where you want to have some sort of focus there. But also making sure that your teams have this focus as well. Now, what's also worth mentioning is, if I say I personally don't have chronic stress, anxiety or depression, but I could look at the signs of depression and on any given bad day think, Jesus Christ, I'm stressed, I've got depression, but I don't. I'm just having a bad day. So it's about being able to recognise a bad day for what it is, just a bad day. If it's more than that, it's having that awareness as well. So a good place to start with this sort of self-awareness and this recognition of your own personal state of mind is to create something called a bucket. So we use bucket theory. So what you need to do is first of all, you need to draw yourself a bucket. So in the style of Blue Peter, here's one I drew earlier. So then what you need to do, once you've got your stress bucket, you need to put in your stressors. What are the daily things that contribute to your higher level of stress? So as an example, we've got ill health. So a lot of people worry about ill health. Workload is one of the biggest contributors to stress. Every organisation I work with, workload comes up. Then the kids. For me, the thing that I am most proud of is my kids, but they, without a doubt, they are my number one stressor. And then finally, coronavirus. Now I would say personally, I am not a natural worrier, but in light of the situation at the moment, I would say, yeah, I am worried about coronavirus. Probably for my parents' health, mother-in-law, etc. Anybody I know that would be at high risk. So then, if all those things are flowing into my bucket, the issue is if that bucket starts to overflow. And what does that look like in real life? Does that look like somebody having a potential heart attack? Does that look like somebody having a panic attack? Does that look like somebody losing the joy in life and feeling miserable? So this is about being able to identify what are all the things that contribute to our stress bucket, and what does it look like when it overflows? So then, once we've identified what the stress going in is, we then need to create some holes in the bucket. So to create some holes in the bucket, create some holes, and then what we do is we identify what are our positive coping strategies, or what could our positive coping strategies be. So when we talk about positive coping strategies, they are obviously the opposite of negative coping strategies. So a classic negative coping strategy is, I've had a bad day at work, I go home and crack open a bottle of wine and polish the bottle off. Now, don't get me wrong, I like a drink as much as anybody listening to this probably does, but it's about this relationship. There's nothing wrong with going home and having a glass of wine, having a gin and tonic, having a bottle of beer, but it's that relationship between having the bad day and feeling like you need the alcohol. So that would be a negative coping strategy. Somebody who gets stressed and smokes more cigarettes. Someone who has a a high level of stress or has some sort of trauma and turns to recreational drugs. So it's about that, a negative versus a positive coping strategy. So some positive coping strategies could be exercise, so getting up and going for a jog in the morning, going to the gym, or not at the moment. Practicing some form of mindfulness, so having some daily moments of calm throughout the day. Having some me time, having some time that's just for you. A lot of us feel, or one of the things that comes up on training courses a lot, what I've noticed is when we get a busy work life and we've got a busy home life, the first thing that gets sacrificed is me time. And quite often when we do then have some sort of me time, we end up feeling guilty about it because we're not doing something for somebody else, and it's rubbish. We should, every single one of us should have some me time. It's not selfish, it's selfless. So it's about focusing on yourself. You've got to look after yourself before you look after everybody else. Putting the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on the kids and everybody else. You've got to look after number one. Then practicing some sort of positive psychology. So when we talk about positive psychology, I always refer to Martin Seligman and the PERMA model. If anybody wants more information on that, I can send you some more information. Really, we'll probably do a webinar on it at some point. But positive psychology is a great place to start. The next thing I want to look at then is what we call originally this was the 5 ways to well-being. We've adapted it slightly because one of my clients, Manchester University, they talk about the 6 ways. Now I think the 6 ways is a lot better than the 5 ways because one of them is absolutely crucial to the time that we're going through at the moment. So the first 5 are the original 5 ways to well-being. So the number 1 is connecting with people. We know that human beings, we are creatures of habit. We need human connection. We thrive on connecting with other people. We're social animals. So when we take that away from ourselves, it feels really strange. It feels difficult for many of us. Now, obviously, social interaction has been brought to a halt with isolation and keeping 2 meters away from everybody, but technology has come in useful. So we're using things like Zoom, using things like Google Hangouts, using things like iMessaging and video calling and all the rest of it. That interaction doesn't need to stop. Then we've got being physically active. So we all know that being active releases endorphins and the happy hormones and makes us physically feel good. If anybody's seen the Black Dog video by the World Health Organization that talks about the relationship between a perceived black dog and depression, one of the things it notes in that video is that physical activity has been clinically proven to have the same effect on mild to moderate depression as taking antidepressants. I nearly said antibiotics. Been totally wrong there. So taking antidepressants is the equivalent, or can be the equivalent, of being physically active. Now, obviously, some people will need medication to deal with their level of depression, but for a lot of us, getting out the door, getting off your butt, going for a walk, being physically active can have that same response. We've then got taking notice. So taking notice for me refers to 2 things. One is mindfulness, so being present, reconnecting with your senses. And then the second thing is having that personal check-in, asking yourself, how am I today? Are you within your norm? Or are you having one of these bad days? And do you recognise it? We've then got learning, so keeping your brain active. I've put in here, not dwelling on the negatives. At the moment, if I go on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything like any sort of form of social media, I'll be bombarded with scary facts around coronavirus, the doom, the gloom, the death rates, everything else. And you know what? You could buy into that and totally go to town and just consume all that negative material and feel absolutely terrified and terrible. But what I'd encourage you to do is try and consume some positive material. Watch something funny, focus on something humorous, think about gratitude lists, do some of the things that make you absolutely feel good as opposed to just dwelling on the negatives. We've then got give. So give refers to giving something to somebody. For example, if I give you a compliment, I could see that makes you feel good. And by seeing that I've made you feel good, that would internally make me feel good as well. So we all have the power to make ourselves feel better. So that might be trying to do something for a neighbour, trying to do something for somebody else, giving something away for free, trying to do something that's, initially selfless. Then we've got be healthy. So this is the additional that Manchester University threw in. Obviously, you can see the relevance of it with the current coronavirus situation. So personal hygiene, eating a healthy diet, being physically active, getting a good night's sleep, really focusing on the basics. So not trying to do elaborate exercise regimes, not learning how to do burpees and clapping press-ups and all the rest of it. It's just doing the really simple things. So this is going back to managing your manageable health, the things that you've got control over. Sleep, diet and movement. Really, really simple things to start with. So as far as some tips for self-care, especially when working from home, so the first thing we've put in here would be building a routine. So sleep, they did some research into sleep recently, or the relationship between sleep and mental illness, and found that there wasn't a single mental ill health condition that wasn't associated with poor sleep. Every single element or every single component of mental ill health has some form of association with poor sleep. So sleep, without doubt, is the most unrated or underrated element of well-being that could be contributing to a high sense of good health. So first thing you need to do is identify some sort of routine. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. Even though you don't have the 2-hour commute and you have to get the early morning train and you can actually probably roll out of bed and your day's probably a little bit more relaxed than it maybe used to be, it's still a good idea to try and stick to some sort of bedtime routine and wake routine. We've then got structure. So scheduling your day, using some sort of structure. Many of you might have heard of sort of the 25-minute process, where you, instead of trying to work indefinitely and just whenever you can, fitting in 25-minute blocks of work for a specific task. So that might be 25 minutes of emailing with no interruptions. So you put your phone somewhere else, you stay away from the fridge and the kettle, you tell the kids to go watch a movie, you do something where you can just do 25 minutes of continuous work on a particular task. And once that 25 minutes is up, you do another 25 minutes and another 25 minutes. And then you schedule in some breaks as well. Which brings us on to this one. So making sure that you put the breaks in your diary. Don't just take breaks whenever you can, because what will happen is you'll never end up taking any breaks. And we know that when we don't take breaks, we lose our productivity. So making sure that you put some breaks in the diary, into your schedule for the day. Then, creating the workspace. So what I'm talking about here is making your workspace well defined. So if you're working from home, make sure it feels like an actual workspace and that you're not just sat at home. So for me, I'm currently set up at my kitchen table and I've got a great setup. I've got my big desk mat, I've got my second screen, I've got my screen riser, I've got my water bottle right next to me so I don't have to keep going to the fridge and back. So making it so it feels like a little mini office, but then also being able to detach from that when you're not working. So it does feel like home again. So it doesn't all merge into one. As far as mental health then, and mental well-being, number one priority should be getting enough sleep. So prioritise sleep, build a bedtime routine, and try and adhere to keeping up to the same sleep-wake cycles that you would normally have. If anybody struggles with sleep, we've got some fantastic content on sleep as well. Practicing mindfulness, so having some me time, have some little moments of calm throughout the day. Communicating, so making sure that we stay in touch with people, we stay social. We've got to look after our social well-being, so keeping up with communication with our colleagues, with our bosses, with our friends and our family. And then finally, I've put gratitude in there. So focusing every day on something positive. So writing down 3 things that you are personally grateful for. So like I said, it's easy for me to think that the kids are winding me up, but absolutely, they are the things that I'm most grateful for. So for me today, if I think about a gratitude list, I'm grateful because it's been fairly sunny where I am in Leeds. So I've been out in the garden with the kids a little bit. I've had a fairly productive day. I've managed to get a little bit of work done this evening. So that's good. And number 3, we're all in good health. So that's three great things that I can be grateful for. So creating a gratitude list is a great way of balancing out all the negativity that's banding around at the moment. Then we've got physical well-being. So from a physical health point of view, it's the simple things. Again, it's keeping hydrated, drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, 2 litres. So 6 to 8 glasses, that'd be about 250 ml per glass. Caffeine, not consuming ideally more than 3 cups a day. You probably want to limit that caffeine to anywhere near up to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and not have any caffeine after that if it inhibits your sleep. Some of us it will inhibit sleep and some of us it won't. Limit sitting as much as possible. So if you can, pick your laptop up. If you're working on a laptop, stand at a higher desk, stick it on a shelf and work from a shelf for a while so you can stand up and work. Obviously move around as much as possible. Your nutrition, without going too complex into nutrition, just eating a healthy balanced diet. We can send you plenty of information on what a healthy balanced diet looks like if you're not too sure. Health, adhering to good hygiene, making sure you're washing your hands, making sure that you're looking after your physical health, trying to build a good immune system. We've got a good seminar being created at the moment by my colleague Sue Jones on building a good immune system. And then finally, being active. So being physically active doesn't mean going to a gym. It can be any form of physical activity. So it could be walking, it could be gardening, it could be walking up and down the stairs, it could be cleaning the house, it could be absolutely anything that keeps you active. We've then got home exercises. I won't spend too long on this because this is just to give you some ideas, not too prescriptive because I don't know what kind of state of health you guys are all in. But we've got some beginning exercises, things like doing a squat and a press up, a step up and some side raises, and then some more advanced versions of those. If anybody wants something more specific, you want some detailed information on what a good exercise regime looks like, feel free to get in touch. So then, in summary, how do we look after ourselves? We should be taking notice of the signs. So how do I feel about myself on a daily basis? Do I recognise when I'm having a bad day? So that's all we recognise. We're not trying to define whether it's stress, anxiety or depression or something else. It's just, is it different from how I should normally feel? Then plan your day. So make sure you've got some sort of diary, some sort of plan of action of what you want to achieve. Being physically active, make sure there's some form of physical activity in there on a daily basis. Eating a balanced diet. Keeping some sort of balance between work and life. So making sure you separate those sort of time constraints. So don't just work here, there and everywhere and whenever you can. Make sure that you try and create some sort of plan where for me personally, I'll get up and do a couple of hours on an early morning before the kids wake up. As soon as the kids are up, I'm not very productive at all. So then it's then planning in a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there, and making sure that those times I stick to them because they need to be my personal work times. So doing something similar could work for you. Then finally, probably more important than anything else, if you remember one message, it should probably be this: toilet paper will not save you. So don't go hoarding, think about other people, look after yourself, and if you have any questions, we've got a slide for that. If you've got any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. So my email address is andy@wearewellbeing.co.uk. The website is obviously wearewellbeing.co.uk, and we are on Twitter at WAW Wellbeing. So if you do have any questions on this content or any other content, anything around wellbeing, feel free to get in touch and we'd love to help you out. Okay, take care, look after yourselves, and we'll hopefully see you at some point. Cheers.